Wait, I'll open it.
Huh? What? Okay. Are we there? No, are we not quite there? Are we getting there? Have we
Yeah, we're
already been
getting
there?
there.
Have we already been there and I missed the whole thing?
Welcome everybody. Make sure that you're muted because we had a lot of signups for today, so people are still like in the waiting room and coming in. Um, Welcome everybody. It's so exciting. I see so many familiar faces and a bunch of new faces as well. Let me just go straight to the point. There will be questions. First, Kenny will just talk a little bit, and I'll facilitate whatever questions you have. You can put them in the chat while we're at it. Make sure to mute your mic because there's just so many of us. Let me introduce you, Mr. Kenny Werner.
Yay! Oh, that's
Yay!
me.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not supposed to be the one applauding.
You
Okay.
can use the emotions in the bottom there. It says reactions. You can like put a heart or like put a
I gotta tell you, one of
right?
the things I discovered in this era of emojis, it's a lot easier to give your heart emoji than it is to give your heart.
Oh,
Have you
that's so
noticed that?
deep.
Much easier to simply use a heart emoji.
Yes.
So hello, whoever's already here, and I know that that's building. Welcome. Uh, this will be about rhythm. So when I start talking about rhythm, it has to start with effortless mastery because why are you not rhythmic? Why are you not as rhythmic as you could have been? What has been the barrier? It always gets back down to the mind. Okay, so the first premise is how do I stop blocking things that would obviously improve my playing and in three areas: rhythm, harmony, and melody. If I can't let go, it's because I either don't know one or more of those things or I don't know them well enough to let go. The lower echelon of effortless mastery is getting rid of the psychological slash spiritual reasons you can't let go. So, what's the psychological, spiritual reasons you can't let go? Because you actually conflate your value as a human with how good you play. If those two things didn't happen, there would be no drama. You would simply get at it. So, what if you don't have a made up reason why you can't, I remember what I wanted to say. She said, make sure you're muted. Make sure your Zoom is muted, but we never want you to be muted again. Okay? So, if you don't have psychological reasons for why you can't let go, then there is other very good reasons. Rhythm, harmony, and melody are not enough within your grasp. So when you play, you might have all the philosophical stuff lined up perfectly, but you still have to struggle to be rhythmic or to play in time. So the reason I talk about that first is because it's the reason behind everything. If you knew exactly the right thing to practice, and that's what this 10-week course will cover, sharpening your rhythm, knowing what to do to sharpen your rhythm is really easy. Doing it is the tricky part because your mind will tell you all sorts of stuff. And whatever your mind is telling you is the reason you either stop doing it or you did it, but it didn't work, so you stopped doing it. Or you never really did it because your mind's telling you should have done it 10 years ago. Or whatever else your mind is telling you, it's blocking the simple act of doing it. So those of you who have studied with me before, to study rhythm is still to study effortless mastery. Because if we don't remove the invisible blocks between you and the thing you're trying to upgrade, then someone could show you the right stuff to practice. And it still wouldn't lead anywhere. So if you're not blocking yourself with self-doubt and making your playing a condition for self-love or at least self-embracing, then the question is, how do you get at rhythm? And why has it never happened? As a little bit of background, most European and American, people of European background, there was inbred a sort of an arrogance about rhythm. Let's say you're a classical player and you've studied all the notes and, the harmonies and the linear stuff, right? And somehow we thought the rhythm was just going to be there. So the arrogance there, or the institutional, structural arrogance, is not realizing that rhythm takes as much, if not more, conscious practice to install it. Another popular belief about rhythm is just same popular belief about creativity. Some of us have it and some of us don't. Okay. All right. That was a moment. It was good. It's like a car accident. At least it gets your attention, And for the moment it has your attention, you're not thinking about yourself. Yeah. But we want to learn how to not think about ourselves while we train the body to play the instrument. So rhythm is assumed, it does seem like certain people are born to play rhythmically. And it also seems that typically they come from places like Brazil, South America, Africa, right? And of course, if you grow up in a rhythmic society, you've already achieved something that we thought we could not achieve because we didn't grow up in a rhythmic society. I'm sorry, but if you grew up in the land of Christmas carols, you did not really grow up in a rhythmic society. And I don't count pop music because that's just boom, 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 boom. But there are cultures that have all sorts of rich rhythms. There are cultures where a baby is born and brought into a rhythmic circle. And these people reach our shores and they seem to have rhythm. And indeed they do. And implicit in that is that we don't. So what effortless mastery has taught us is that when you go past the mind, you can put information deeper than in the mind. You can put it in the body. And no more is this relevant than in the area of rhythm. Sports coaching has always been a lot more correct when it comes to who's playing. In sports, they accept that the body is the one that plays. It's the body that needs to be programmed. But in music, there's this romantic notion of lumping it all together and my worthiness to play it and all this irrelevant shit, which is so prevalent but irrelevant, right? But nowhere is it truer, and rhythm needs to go past your ability to play rhythmically. In other words, you don't want to have to access rhythm. Like I'm rhythmic sometimes if I got a good nap, or I'm rhythmic if I don't have a cold, or I'm rhythmic if I'm happy, or you know what I mean? Rhythm is not a condition. In some of these people that we admire / are jealous of, they were born with rhythm. They were born in a rhythmic culture. But what effortless mastery posits is that you can go from something that essentially lay outside you, and having moved the mind out of the way, you can train the body to accrue rhythm that it never had. But this is where effortless mastery comes in. There's a degree of like leaving the mind out. If you want to train the body to be rhythmic, you have to be able to reasonably leave the mind out of the equation. So that's the sort of psychological background of how we would approach rhythm. We're not trying to learn rhythm, and we're not trying to be rhythmic. We want to do nothing, and the body plays rhythm. And old assumptions is that if you were from one of those cultures, then you could do that. And implicit in that is that if you're from, the land of Christmas carols, you probably can't do that. So how do we train the body to be rhythmic? So it starts with dropping this presumption that we should have been somebody else to be rhythmic. And understand that it's really closer, more easily to understand in terms of sports than any of the other two things, melody and harmony. For example, I'm not really a basketball fan. I'm a baseball fan. But I can see, I've shot baskets and then I'm standing there and I'm dribbling the ball, right? And this is the way I dribble the ball. Each individual thing, I hit the ball, it hits the floor, comes back up, I hit it again. If I take my eyes off of it, I probably move my hand over there and the ball is over there, right? Yet, people who have programmed rhythm into their body, they move like this. Not only that, but somehow it's so locked into the body that not only are they not looking at their hand, from what I understand about basketball, they're actually looking down there, looking for a lane, right? But this is happening by itself. The idea that the body can be programmed to exude rhythm comes to the same principle as using a fork. Now, you may not think much of using a fork, but try to ask any other species to use a fork, and it can look extremely complex. Or I like the whole equation between chopsticks and forks, right? Now, if you're Asian, I mean, this is a good analogy because if you're Asian, you probably have used chopsticks all your life, right? So I'm in a restaurant of some thing from that part of the world, and the Asian guys are going like that, and they're checking their social media. Now, for me to use chopsticks, which I choose to use a fork, I've got to concentrate to get 2 grains of rice in my mouth. So what allows them to use chopsticks mindlessly? It's not talent. It is something they've been doing from birth. But as we know, there's plenty of people that use chopsticks enough so they can pretty much use it easily. And the reason you can train yourself to use chopsticks is because there's no emotional element to whether you're using them well or not. But with music, there's this whole other implied, I would say imagined, test of one's value. So if I want rhythm, and I'll tell you how I found some of this out, a little more background. When I was at Berkeley, down the road was one of the greatest jazz clubs in an era when they had jazz clubs in a lot of places, the Jazz Workshop. So I could just walk down Boylston Street and I could go hear Bill Evans play every night. And I could hear McCoy Tyner play every night, or Chick Corea, or whoever. I couldn't hear Herbie Hancock because he had a big hit with Watermelon Man, so he played concerts in the bigger rooms. But Bill Evans, McCoy, Chick, these guys still played in clubs, and I just lived down the street. I'm watching them every night. Now, there's no night when McCoy Tyner, as anybody around my age that listened to jazz, could tell you, probably agree, was the most, as we say, burning piano player of the time. He played eighth notes in such a strong way that it reminded you more of what mallet players do. And you could actually hear the note space in between the eighth notes. And it was so burning that he used to get the most burning drummer and then he'd burn that drummer out. He was like a percussionist on the piano. So I'm going every night, I'm saying, like everybody else, I'm blowing away every night, even if he doesn't feel like he's even on his game. The muscle memory, this is where the words motor skill come into play, is such that he's never not the most burning piano player I could see. But maybe unlike my friends, I ask myself, why? Why is he that burning every night? Why don't I hear any variation in that? So, and the answer, when it dawned on me, if we were doing a more back and forth, I would ask, does anybody know why he was that burning every night? And I do that when I'm physically in a class, and people give a lot of answers that are partially true. But here's an answer that's undeniable. It must be easy. If something is difficult, you may only do it 3 times out of 5 times. If it's very difficult, you may only do it 1 time out of 5 times. If it's too difficult, you may never be able to do it. But it's easy, then you do it on that level all the time. So I refer you back to using a fork. And that was even in the first book, Effortless Mastery. You've used a fork hundreds of thousands of times. Did you ever miss your mouth? So of course the joke is, yes, yeah, but I mean, maybe you were drunk or whatever, but let's say you missed your mouth 7 times out of 100,000. I'd say that's mastery. And remember, when you were using a fork, it didn't matter what else you were doing. Bullseye every time. So once I realized that, the goal was not to be able to play rhythm. The goal was to be able to keep retreading the pathway of rhythm until it became easier and easier. Because the easier it became to play rhythm, not only did my rhythm then jack up to another level, but I could depend on it more. To this day, if I haven't played, I've always been a natural harmonicist and melodicist, but I didn't grow up with rhythm. I mean, I didn't come from, Ghana or Rio, Came from Long Island, a distinctly arrhythmic place, if you've ever been there. So, sorry, anybody's from Long Island, but, so if I haven't played in a while, there's only one thing that could fail me usually. It's the rhythm. Is my rhythm crisp? Am I on time? That's the thing I notice a variance of. So I kept working, and I've had a very big wake-up call at around 30 years old when I did a record, the solo record, and I realized, and then I went out on tour with Archie Shepp and a rhythm section. And when I came back, I was distinct. By the way, if any of you are contemplating making your first record, you can remember this. No matter how you make that record, you're going to think you learned something after you made that record, and you wish you hadn't already made that record. And you say, shit, I wish I didn't make it, So if that happens to you, you can laugh, because I actually told you that was what was going to happen, right? But I thought, shit, I'm so much more rhythmic now than I was when I made this solo record. Everything started one place, then a sustain pedal came, then it got faster. I'm aspiring to Keith Jarrett, but Keith Jarrett has rhythm. It hurt enough so that from that point on, which is approximately 40 years ago, I decided everything I would practice would also have a rhythmic component. Even if I was practicing harmony, I had to couch it in a rhythm, because what I wanted to do is go from someone who could be rhythmic if the drummer doesn't lose him, or if the drummer keeps a good beat, to somebody that was rhythmic from within. And I noticed every yearly and decades that what was a weakness became stronger and stronger, until I have ways for compensating for the fact that I wasn't born rhythmically that makes me seem as effortlessly rhythmic as someone that grew up in that rhythmic culture, And part of it is removing the veil of ego. Instead of judging yourself, I could never do that, just understanding that the body is a programmable thing. And that if you drop off all the ego issues, like the number one ego issue is, how am I doing? If that became something you chose not to think about, then you can train yourself. So for our course, for example, we're going to train ourselves to get rid of all the pseudo-importance of our practicing and try to reduce it to something that we could never fail to do. When it comes to practicing, I compare it to brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth with a sense of urgency. You don't brush your teeth and ask yourself how you're doing. And you don't think you're heading anywhere. You say, wow, I'm really brushing good tonight. No matter how good you brush them tonight, you fully expect to brush them again tomorrow morning. Imagine if that was your attitude towards practicing. And then if you had efficient things to practice, you could just point your body in the direction of becoming a sharper and sharper instrument that plays music. So while we're working on the mindset that makes you more regular about practicing rhythm than you've ever been, it's nice to start without the silent insinuation that you can't do it. How many people practice rhythm and, like subliminally, they were already convinced it's not going to go anywhere? How much we get in the way of us is effortless mastery. So there's nothing I can teach that won't have a component of that. Because when you take yourself out of the way, everything gets a lot easier. Then it's only a matter of programming your muscles. When I went to hear Bill Evans every night, his rhythm was always the same, but the key quality of Bill Evans was harmony. But he was never less harmonic on one night than another. Why? It must have been easy. So that's why we've done a course on harmony. And those of you that took it, all you have to do is take exactly what those exercises are and don't stop. And you will find yourself evolving harmonically in spite of what your beliefs are about how you don't learn anything new. Because repetition of a good exercise changes you. The only reason it hasn't is because you talked yourself out of it before you got there. So any of you that took the linear class or the harmonic class, first of all, you might notice that your harmony has been advancing. You might notice that you're starting to find lines emerge from you. But it's just the beginning. If those exercises, which never took more than 5 to 15 minutes a day, never stopped like brushing your teeth, all you'd have to do is deal with the emotions of your constantly improving lines and changes. And now we're addressing the third leg of that, your rhythm. So once we understand that we're not going to employ things that get in our way, like, for example, hope. Hope is a buzzkill. Just do it. I hate to quote Nike, but just do it. Here's an exercise. Just do it. Don't hope it goes anywhere. Because then, if it doesn't go anywhere in your time, then you think it's not happening. So we want to get rid of those kinds of things that we think is context. And we want to just do something like you would brush your teeth. It's always a very good model. If you could practice with the lack of expectations from which you brush your teeth, with the lack of a goal, and you never ask yourself how you're doing, you take all you could, for yourselves, write down what you think are the aspects that make brushing your teeth absolutely a certainty for the rest of your life. And if you could apply a few of those to practicing, then you would never stop practicing for the rest of your life. Because you're not trying to get anywhere. That's, one of the things the ego does. Now, once we understand that, then the rhythmic exercises will start with, first of all, a metronome. I don't care what anyone feels about a metronome. When we're working on rhythm, a metronome is absolutely essential. Because if I'm playing a rhythm, how do I know that the integrity of the rhythm has stayed where it is? I need a ruler. And that ruler is the metronome. So I want to demonstrate what the first exercise will be. When it comes to rhythm, one of the ways we defeat ourselves is by trying to control too much rhythm at one time. So if any of you have studied, the 4th step of effortless mastery, you know that the shorter the example, the deeper you can embed the thing into your body. So for me, it's not about playing long lines or many bars of rhythm. It's about embedding the perfect rhythm in the shortest unit, and then allow those units to be strung together like a string of pearls. So for example, okay, so here's one way I would use a metronome. If jazz is sort of your desire, fantasy, then you might want to hear that as 2 and 4. 1, 1, 1. Now you notice the ease with which I say 1. If you have to do this, 1, 1. Or after 2 of them, you're going 1. If you're turning around, or you have to constrain yourself just to not turn it around. With effortless mastery, we don't move forward. Any of you who have trouble, and maybe you want it slower, that's okay. Any of you today, here's an assignment. If you hear this, and you have to do this. 1. Then take this week and practice being able to hear it without caring if you hit it right or not. 1. 1. 1. If you let go, you might find you've quickly done this. 1. 1, right? However, now that you're not just subjecting your body to a rhythmic upgrade, you're also managing those stupid emotions that get in the way of being able to do that. So you might say, I just can't find it at that tempo. That is honoring yourself. Thinking I should be able to find it at that tempo, that's the old programming. Whatever you're supposed to be enough, you're not enough. Okay? Every course of mine, we start by turning that over on. I don't want to say turning it on its head. I want to say turning it right side up. If I can't do that, let's say I slow it down. Oh, my body just relaxed. 1. I'm doing 2 bar phrases. 1. 1. Those of you that are not sure that you can find that without tensing up, take this week and practice finding it without tensing up. By the time it works by itself, you'll already notice your rhythm is getting better. The things that we don't confront that make this simpler have to do with effortless mastery issues. Self-esteem. Self-esteem completely clouds the issue of how do I upgrade this instrument? Okay? So, but here we are, and let me put it to a tempo that doesn't make me tense up. So the first thing is on whatever instrument, the shortest unit that I want to be as strong as possible. 1, 2. You see, and it's not about whether I play it right or not, because I could do this. But then, of course, my rhythm wouldn't be getting any better. There's a difference. Effortless mastery also clears this up. There's a difference between being able to play something and ever being able to use it. And the difference is how easy it is. If you have to go like this and tighten parts of your body that aren't even related to playing, if you have to do this to your shoulders to play piano, then it's inefficient. No substitute for me staying out of the way. Now my hand is what's showing me rhythm, not my desire. Now I want to move on from that. I might turn the notes around or change them to something that don't. When you ask somebody, do they have rhythm? You have to first say, I don't know. What is the pattern? I don't know if there's any trumpet players here. I only see the top level of you because I'm looking at myself. But if there's a trumpet player, and I say, are you rhythmic? And I say, play something in B flat. They go, ba-ba-do-bop. Okay, now play something in B. And it's like, bup. So we don't really know how rhythmic you are. It depends on the pattern. In effortless mastery, you're not trying to avoid what you can't do. You're looking for what you can't do so that you can upgrade it. So let's say the pattern is this. I don't think I'll be as rhythmic as when I did this. Let's see. What was that? No, not at all. So it depends on the pattern. But once you've had the first example spill out of you, now you're making a new neurological imprint. Rhythm comes from my body. So the first thing you find is a pattern that proves that. And you isolate the part of you, even if you're a singer, rhythm is created by syllables. So it really doesn't matter what the instrument is. Once you've got that, we start to move it around the bar. So let's say that's on 1, right? But would you feel as comfortable if it started on the end of 1? What if it started on 2? 1. What if it started on the end of 2? 1. What if it started on 3? 1. And so on. The end of 4. 1. By the time every one of those 4-note packets became comfortable wherever they started in the bar, you would already notice the difference in your playing. I don't favor a lot of practicing for no change, which is what most people experience. I'm lazy. I want to find the least amount of practice and notice change in my playing immediately. So I can tell you, if you take nothing else out of this webinar and decide I'm going to take 4 notes and move it around the bar against a metronome, but I'm not going to do 7 of them. In effortless mastery, quantity is always the enemy of quality. If you say I'm going to do 7 different places or 8 different places, you're not going to own any of them. But if you decide I'm going to go into the space and I'm going to start on the end of 3. 1. And I'm not going to leave that 1 until it plays itself. Then I might move it around. This kind of discrimination between what's exactly the right amount to practice and what is already beginning to dilute the practicing, this kind of discrimination itself takes practice. We want to learn to practice any single rhythmic exercise so that it becomes as easy as any rhythm we can already play. Unless we've noticed that by ducking rhythmic exercises, we can't play anything rhythmic. And there may be a lot of you here. There's no level of your rhythm that won't qualify for this course, because wherever you're at, taking it on specifically and taking it on for what it is, motor skill, will upgrade your rhythm. If you have no rhythm, you'll begin to have some rhythm. And if you have a monogram of rhythm, you'll notice increased rhythm, increased versatility, increased dependence, depending on the rhythm. If you want to know what it's like to depend on your rhythm, you have to experience it in the first exercise. And now, having experienced it, you might try it. I'm going to take a 4-bar phrase, and I'm going to play those 4 notes on beat 2 of the 3rd bar. 1, 4. I didn't even have to think about it. You're probably not going to get there, but you might. But you're going to continually move forward. What I will guarantee is that your rhythm is better after 10 weeks. There's no question about it, because for one thing, you've never just focused on rhythm, because it was part of this big bundle of, romancing music in general. So first thing we're going to hip ourselves to, what is it like to consistently practice rhythm? The second thing is our standard for a rhythm having been absorbed is a lot higher. I'm not playing the rhythm, my hand is, or my hand on my armature is, or my fingers ba-ba-da-bop. Any rhythm clearly defined to your motor skill finally starts to inform your playing in general. So we don't know how far you get while we're together, but there's no question that you'll have a model for how to continue to practice rhythm for the rest of your life. And you do want to. One of the things I'm always encouraging, try to leave the question alone, how am I doing? Because that implies a time limit. I should have been able to do this by now. Why didn't I learn this 10 years ago? Or I'll never learn this. What's the similarity in those 3 statements? Time. You're implying what you can and can't do because of time. But nothing defeats that better than being able to be in the moment. That's effortless mastery. And in this moment, I could be practicing rhythm. The only thing that might discourage me, and I will be coaching you away from this every week. Frank, I see you. You're one of the people out there. If you're having any trouble doing the things we've done in previous courses, you've forgotten this one thing. I don't practice to get results. I practice to lock in the idea of practicing. If you bring that back, you can practice anytime. It only gets sticky when you try to put a context on it. And when you put a context on it, you miss the improvement that's already happened. In almost every case, effortless mastery has to be at least part of the equation. Because see, from the ego, you measure yourself by the times it's not happening. From the space, you just notice that it is happening. From the ego, there's success and failure. From the space, failure is success. You just want to learn how to keep rocking yourself back into that place. And when it gets iffy, you've probably forgotten one little thing. You know? So now we're going to apply that beam. And it is a beam. It's like a laser on our muscle memory, on our motor skill. Maybe I can't play 4 notes rhythmically, but I'll bet I can play 2. If I can play 2, let me see if I can play 3. Oh no, I had to reach for the third one. So I actually play the second and third. If that happened by itself, then I add the first. That was progress. Taking what I used to think I had to generate and watching my body playing it for me. In order to observe the progress that is happening, you have to come into the space. Otherwise, you're in the future or the past. You know? So there's 4-note exercises that get moved around. Then there could be 8-note exercises if it's like, and you get materials. In fact, Vivian, you could put that in the chat. There are rhythmic exercises. She's going to show you, she's going to put in the chat. There's nothing new about them. And in fact, they might be in the most rudimentary drum book. The difference is the philosophy or psychology that you're going to apply to mastering any one of those exercises. How many theory books have you ever bought? How many things have ever changed in your playing from the theory books? The first thing I'm happy to offer you is this. Take one exercise in that book and master it, and you're going to notice your playing has been informed by that. Try to cover the book, and you may have, but you've accomplished nothing. Quantity is always the enemy of quality. Ownership is more possible the smaller the example is. That ownership leaves an impression that can be felt when you're not even doing effortless mastery. Wow, I seem to be more rhythmic without having to gearing myself up for it. So these exercises that Vivian are putting in the chat are what we're used to cut our teeth on rhythm. But in the process, it's going to be, how do I practice it, stay out of the way, so that the body can master those exercises. Even if you have practiced rhythm, the effort to play rhythm has been the barrier to allowing the body to become rhythmic. So it starts with these exercises, but there's a lot of goodies I'm going to share with you, like how I practice more abstract things against the time. How to play looser phrases in between 2-bar phrases is not by trying to play loose, but by taking your attention off of the inner stuff and just drop your energy on the goalposts Let me give you an example of that. So I'm going to slow it way up. Sorry for all the noise out there. They're working on stuff. I don't know if you're hearing it. But... Okay, so I do this a lot. You can all hear that, right? And now, I don't care what I play in between. It's that I line up with these ticks. And I don't care if I line up or not. But if you give the body the opportunity to keep playing, you're going to notice that you're starting to line up with this grid. The grid of playing rhythm and time is the integrity of the 2-bar phrase or the 1-bar phrase or the 4-bar phrase. Depends on the tempo. So if the tempo is like really fast, it might be 4-bar phrase. This is too fast. So let's say a 2-bar phrase. See, I'm starting to relax between those places. So when I remove the metronome, I mean, I saw that from watching Herbie Hancock play. Why is he so loose, but then it hooks up? Besides the first answer I gave you, that it must be easy, the second answer is, it's not where you are in every beat, it's where you're going. Ba, ba-doo. Beetle it up. Even drummers get stiff because they play every beat. Ba, da, ah, ba, 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 ba. So we're going to practice, and I'm going to reveal everything that you could ever use for practice. I could take that same amount of time and decide I'm playing in 7. Some of you will be advanced enough where I'm going to show you how to loosen the shit up you're already playing. Some of you have never been that rhythmic. We're going to install Rhythm. The app, the Rhythm app, but not on your phone, in your body. You know? So that's pretty much what's going on. That's what we're going to do. We could take any, Viv, we could take questions right now. You know, what if? What about me? How do I do this? Whatever.
Yeah, or shall I first tell about the course and then we can take
Sure.
questions after? Yeah, so I'll add myself as a spotlight. So we're gonna do, as you've heard, Kenny talked about the harmony and alliance courses. They will obviously happen again. We don't know exactly when, but I'm sure they will. We take it one step at a time. The next thing coming up is this rhythm course that's going to be 10 weeks on Zoom, in person on Zoom. It will be a smaller group than like 400 people probably. So it's these courses have been super nice, as a couple of our friends in this call can share with you. And I made a whole page where you can just read everything about it. I'll put it in the chat, but I can also just share my screen.
Yeah, see if you see yourself in it.
Yeah, so
Lady.
we called it Becoming a Rhythmic Being. So it's a 10-week
Yeah.
course. It's going to be on Thursdays, 3 p.m. So that's the same time as we started today. So whatever time zone that is in where you are. So it will start on March. We will offer phone calls. So whenever you're reading this whole page and you think, I still have questions, is this for me? you can just click on this button and it says book a call, and then you go into the calendar and you just pick a time slot, and then you'll Zoom with Kenny, which is pretty cool. Then, you know, there's all these questions, you know, how's your rhythm? The basic outline that Kenny just talked about. We have some backstory. It's a whole page. There's videos. You can learn a little bit from the videos. We have testimonials. They tell us we have to do a page like that to make it a little more clear what it's actually about. So yeah, please go and check it out. We always love community, so we want the students to connect with each other as well. And we have a bonus. So if you sign up before March 1st, you get a copy of Kenny's new book. And then the first 3 people will get a bonus session, one-on-one class with like a private session.
Sorry about that noise out there.
Yeah, that's pretty loud. Are they? I'm sure it cannot last forever. So yeah, it's 10 weeks for 2,500, just like our last classes, pretty much same pricing. There's there's a lot of questions. Is it all instruments? Yes, it's all instruments. It will take you around 15 minutes a day because we keep the exercises very simple, but you need to repeat them. So you need to have some time to work on it. But even then, you can still use it as your, way to go for when you would have time. All these sessions will be recorded, just like this one. This one will be just sent to you for free. But these courses, all of them are recorded, so you can watch them back and use them for the rest of your life. There was some questions from somebody that was like, well, why don't you sell the courses that you've done up to now, right? Why are you not selling the videos of the Lions class or the Effortless Mastery class? And the reason that we did not do that yet, because we respect the privacy of our students, and because these classes are very interactive and some people share personal stories, especially with the Effortless Mastery classes.
Also, the videos are the property of people that took classes.
Actually, yes. So therefore, we don't sell videos yet. Maybe at some point we decide to make a video course. We'll see. But yeah, we like the interaction, and that's what actually has been very, very fun. Just like we do that at Berkeley. So yeah, check out the link and let me see if there are questions. Duration, it's a 2-hour class, right? Learn, what do you need to, rhythmic language, different rhythmic languages or dialects. Any thoughts on that, Kenny?
Can you say that again?
What do you do?
I was enjoying Joe Mascara's comment in there. It's great. He had the Effortless Mastery course, and that's beautiful. I'm glad, Joe. The other thing I will encourage you guys, if whoever this group is that we spend this time working on rhythm, I'm going to encourage you to keep it together as a group, because you can help each other remember how simple this is. Now, could you ask me that question again, please?
Philip says, what do you do to learn rhythmic languages and dialects like New Orleans second line feel or various Brazilian styles, etc.?
Right. If you want to learn rhythm as a style thing, first of all, it really helps if you can play rhythm. If you can't play rhythm, and maybe Philip has noticed this, if you don't feel like you're rhythmic as a neurological thing, then these styles are way out of your reach. But as with just the motor skill of rhythm itself, you could study, let's say you take 4 bars of New Orleans style. You listen to it, you isolate what that feels like, you try to stay out of the way and let the body take that on. The mistake Philip would be making is just trying to play along, how long he can play it. And if it's never there, it's never going to be there. But if you find 2 bars that, oh, I got the thread of that, When it comes to the ethnic or anything like that, nothing beats spending time in Rio, spending time in New Orleans and hanging with them, spending time in Ghana. The ethnic But if you haven't even allowed the motor skill to become rhythmic yet, then it's just way beyond your reach. So I would say when it comes to applying I wouldn't even say, nix what I first said. I'm not going to practice neurologically getting New Orleans, second line. I'm going to go to New Orleans. But I want to make sure that my body can play rhythm. Then it will, I went to Brazil. I've been there several times, but I went there right after Berkeley, and there's a story I can't tell, but it actually was the best lesson I ever gotten in the bossa nova. There's just something about the bossa nova I'm not going to get just from watching videos, So let's just say, Philip, the more immediate question is, are you a rhythmic being? Is rhythm itself still kind of alien? And how do you know that? I'm relaxed. Now I'm relaxed, but I'm playing rhythm. If you're relaxed and there's no rhythm coming out, then the immediate issue is, how do I create a body that plays rhythm so that I don't have to tense up to do it? Well, having done that, you can learn any language. But I really think the best way to really imbibe that is to spend time in that culture. There were things I learned about the bossa nova that really didn't happen, and I thought I knew everything about the bossa nova. But they couldn't replace this piano player I heard down there, and then somebody explained it to me. It was kind of sexual what he explained, so I'm not going to explain it in public. But you know what? When he got done explaining that, I exactly knew what the bossa nova was supposed to feel like. It was really like Girl from Ipanema. It was amazing. So, and I would say anybody that has imbibed a certain ethnicity of rhythm and you admire them, let's say it's an American, but boy, when they play Arabic music, right, they will tell you they spent time there. Next question, Viv.
The next question is, yes, Emiliano asked, would you recommend learning percussion instruments to improve our rhythm in our main instrument?
Absolutely. The question is, how regular are you going to become about practicing it? The question is, how much, every time, you have to understand, even if you're playing the right rhythm, if you're stiffening up, that's the difference between you and the rhythms that you hear other people playing. So again, sure, you could learn these things on a percussion instrument, even if that's not your instrument. But learning it from the point of effortless mastery means removing the egoistic need to learn it, giving the body the space to learn it. So yeah, that's a great way of doing it.
Awesome.
Part of it is what to study, but boy, as you must have all realized by now, a big part of it is how to study it. How to study. You could study something and see no growth. That, unfortunately, is the common experience. Go ahead, Vivian.
Felix is asking, do you have any tips on practicing comping?
Yes. Next question. I'm just kidding. Yeah. When you're comping for somebody, don't listen to yourself. Listen to the person. And your hands will fall right in the right spots at the right time. The only time you either play too much, or you're too late, or you're too early, is when you stop listening to the person you were comping for and started to pay attention to yourself. That's effortless mastery. Now here's the caveat. If it takes you effort just to play rhythmically, you can't possibly listen to that person. If you listen to them, you might turn the beat around. If you listen to them, you might get lost in the form. So there is something that has to be learned neurologically from within you. And then we can talk about all the applications in the world. But why has it even worked for some people and not for you? That's because however they did it, they installed the rhythm app. Without the rhythm app, a lot of things that should be achievable are not. Yeah, can you learn how to play second line? Yeah, but not if rhythm itself is something that is iffy or sketchy. Can you comp for somebody? Yeah. If I listen to somebody, I have the greatest stories about that, but then this webinar gets really long. But I will tell you this story. I played with Joe Lovano. We played together for 50 years now. Believe me, I never thought I'd say I'd do anything for 50 years. That's fucking ridiculous, right? But Joe was, I mean, he's the most elegant player, but he was the most burning player. And the hardest thing for a piano player to figure out is where to comp. That's why the horn trio became popular. Because the horn player, liberated from the firewall of the piano player and his chords, could just relate to the drummer. And that's why the saxophone trio evolved sans piano, which makes a common joke about the piano. What's the similarity between a piano player, a piano, and a prophylactic? It's good with them, but it's great without them. And that's how the saxophone has started to evolve, to not even deal with piano players. So I'm playing with that kind of a saxophone player, trying to figure out where I should comp. And when I'm trying to figure out, and I know whoever asked that question, you're going to relate to this. Whenever I try to figure out where to comp, I'm always in the wrong place. It's late, or it's early, or the guy was just about to take off and you throw this big fat chord and you stopped him, right? So I'm playing with Lovano, and I'm realizing, I said, let me try something, because I already was semi-aware of what I now call effortless mastery. I'm not going to listen to me, I'm going to listen to him. But I mean, I'm going to listen to him better than if I was in the audience, to the exclusion of my hands, which are over here. They're going to do what they're going to do, but I am going to focus all my attention on this guy's playing. And you know what happened? Every time I dropped the chord, it was exactly where he happened to stop. Every time I dropped, he started to respond to it because there's an osmosis. Now this gets a little spiritual, a little ethereal. When people drop their own boundaries, you may feel this universal consciousness in the world. And musicians feel this every night. That's why the new book says Lessons in Self-Mastery from Music to Life. That's because any really good jazz musicians will tell you that nightly, they're not focusing on themselves, they're focusing on someone else. This shit just happens to work out. It works out because of something else I've said in the new book. Perfection already exists. It's people who fuck it up. If you stay out of the way, it's going to come together, and what's going to get in the way is that you're so excited it came together. Hasn't that happened to you? So it's the practice of not getting in the way. Now, if you don't get in the way, but you haven't become a rhythmic being yet, meaning you have not developed a motor skill that plays rhythm. You always have to tighten whatever to make rhythm. Then you haven't gotten in the game yet. So this course puts a beating heart in you so that the rest of the body can live. You know, it puts a beat in you. Now, all these questions have a possibility. I can comp by not listening to me. That's the short answer. Listen to the soloist. You know, singers love playing with me more than, as Vivian can attest. Because my secret is I'm not even listening to myself. I'm completely enveloped in the sound of the singer. And they feel that. And the irony of that is they never felt so perfectly supported. That's because I'm not focusing on supporting them. Now, if I didn't know harmony, then I'd have to withdraw from that because I might be playing the wrong chords. Rhythmically, if I haven't installed rhythm yet, then if I forget myself and listen to the guy, that's the idea, except I've turned the beat around. Or you know what I'm saying? So this course installs what's missing from the body as an instrument. Or if you've already got it to a certain point, we can go from there to next levels of how you forget it and have it emerge from within you at the same time. So the short answer for comping, that's how you do it. But if you still have to manage your time and manage your rhythm, that's why you can't do it.
Another question. Let's see. Where is it? Yes, Russ is saying, how do you feel about using beats for a metronome rather than the dry click?
You know, I use the metronome because I like to vary the beats, but I have used that too. Again, yes, it can work. But if you're playing with you try, who is it? What's his name?
Russ.
Russ, this is where effortless mastery comes in. You put that beat on, whether it's an Indian tabla or it's the clave or whatever, right? Now, don't try to play with it. Just start playing. If you can't find it, now you know what this course is about. It's about learning to find it without having to locate it. So, yeah, you could just use that, but you want to use a discrimination and how you might have to start simpler. I may have to know where that thing starts. And because I have to reach for where it even starts, I'm never really playing with it. But all these things can work, except if the motor that makes them all work had not been installed, or the app, or whatever analogy we want to use. I think it's great. If you use an app, you might also take on the character of the samba, or the character of the clave, or the character of an Indian tal, or whatever. But if you're practicing with it by tensing up to make it with it, you're not improving anything. What you want to do is find out what you don't know by not trying to play it right. And what you do play right is what you own. And simply making that distinction really causes a sea change, not only in your playing, but your aim for practicing. I want to install what's not there, but because of ego, I never even allowed myself to admit what wasn't there. You know? Staying in the dark can be comfortable, but it's not very satisfying because nothing moves forward. You know? I'm saying let's pull off the band-aid, find out what's missing, and then learn not to care so much. And then get at it.
Cool. Next question is Adalberto saying, is this the same process for ease with odd time signatures?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whatever I put out in 4/4, um, you would just change the number. If I'm playing in 4/4, the rhythm is eighth notes usually, and in 4/4 there's 8 of them. In 7/4 there's 14 of them. In 11 there's 22 of them. I expect the clarity in 11 that I have already experienced in 4. But I haven't experienced clarity in any time signature. Yeah, I may want you to start with 4. Because whatever lack of clarity you have is the best you can bring to a time signature, and usually a downgrade from there. But you can, again, with time signatures, you can isolate 2 bars and make sure they play themselves. By the time they play themselves, your body is already starting to take over some of this responsibility. If they can play 2 bars, you may find that without managing any more, they're playing 4 bars. Before you know it, you've actually taken the shortcut to being able to play in a time signature. But so much of it is getting your mind on your side when it comes to cutting your teeth on rhythm.
Great. Somebody that's on his phone. So I don't know the name. It says Stem Song SM. Do you have any tips on rhythm training for singers?
Yeah, the way to train on rhythm with singers is to use syllables. Syllables have percussive quality. It feels kind of stupid, but if you were to train the syllables to move in different rhythms, with effortless mastery, let me just say one thing. It's never about the exercise you're doing, it's about the effect it has on the rest of your playing. So if you were to work with syllables as a rhythmic motor skill, you go back to sing a song and you notice, why don't I even have to concentrate anymore on where the time is? Because of the effect of the rhythmic training. So yeah, in order to make, I mean, you could do it in a more diluted way by just singing songs and trying to be on time or trying to be a little behind. But it'd be better to decide you're an instrument. And how do you make percussion? With the piano, we make percussion like this. With the saxophone, we make percussion like this. With the singer, we make percussion like this, right? And if that's trained rhythmically, I think you'll feel the effect collaterally on anything you sing.
Nice. Massimo is asking about polyrhythms. I first learned the resulting sound of a polyrhythmic pattern, then I listened to find two different rhythms. What do you think? Any suggestions?
Yeah, you take one of them at a time and make sure you really own it. Because by the time you own it, you've accomplished two very good things. You've established what owning it means, and then you apply that to the next one. Instead of having covered 8 of them and not really embedded any of them, you make sure the first one you pick plays itself. What does it feel like to have created motor skill or muscle memory? It feels like the instrument's playing itself. When you use a fork, are you managing that? No. You could be doing your taxes, having sex, and checking 3 kinds of motor of social media, and you still never miss your mouth. The same principles at play when it comes to rhythm. There are different levels. If I ask you, are you rhythmic? You know, it's such a vague. Well, here's how you know, am I rhythmic? Play a rhythm. If that rhythm is iffy, then the answer is no. And we'd rather face that sooner than later, so we can take the appropriate measures to sharpen that tool. You know? Was that the answer? Yeah. So when it comes to polyrhythm, you take one polyrhythm and you want to make sure that it's so within you that doesn't feel like your definition of polyrhythm. It feels like quarter notes, you know? And then you'll notice by the time you own one polyrhythm, again, the collateral effect of effortless mastery approach is that you don't study 8 things. You actually support yourself enough to even learn one thing to the point of ownership. Because it's the ownership that changes the motor skill. The other benefit of it is that that's the level you're expecting for the next polyrhythm you're practicing. You're expecting it to play itself. You're expecting not to have to listen to it because you hear it. Ownership, I hope you take some of this away, whether you take the course or not. Ownership of one new motor skill changes your playing. Skimming the surface of multiple things changes nothing. You don't have to believe me. Just survey your own history.
Awesome. Next question was from Adrian. How can we relate our rhythmic abilities as players with our biorhythm and the speed of our everyday life?
Well, what is our biorhythm? I don't even know. I've heard that. What is it even? Does anybody know what biorhythm is? Or is that one of those terms that the emperor has no clothes? Everybody uses it. Nobody actually knows what the fuck it is. What is biorhythm? Anybody?
Or we could Wikipedia that.
I guess you could Wikipedia it, which certainly means that whatever's happening, you're not. Is it heart rate and pulse?
It's a
Somebody wrote that.
It's a recurring pattern of psychological states in an organism or an organ.
Okay. Yeah. No, we want to just develop.
Scientific idea. Cycles. I mean, there's
Yeah.
28-day cycles to stuff.
Right.
And
I don't think thinking about your biorhythms are going to help you master any precise rhythm. Although I wouldn't be surprised if your biorhythms change once you stop thinking about biorhythms, you know, and think about, here's a rhythm and I can't play it. So it doesn't go along those kind of vague lines. It's about, think of it more like this is an instrument. Let's say if you were a knife, how dull are you? How sharp are you? All the exercises in rhythm, harmony, and melody are take you from a relative level of dullness, maybe that you've already totally accepted, and it sharpens it up to places where music gets easier to play. Everything you don't have to manage starts to manifest by itself. That is the magic that I and many musicians have experienced. And unfortunately, not too many people can explain to you, you know? How do I become one of those people? I've got to upgrade this instrument, you know? So that's what it does. I don't have to think of harmony. It plays harmony. The things, those of you who took the harmony course, everything from that course, which you have a proprietary video of, all you have to do is pick any one of those things and go back to it. And you'll notice that you're progressing harmonically. And remember, that's as opposed to the usual, which is not at all. And I would make the same statement about the lines. Go back to any one of those exercises and practice it for 10 minutes as if you never saw it before. The upgrade of your instrument to be linear, to be harmonic. And both of those depend even more so on to be rhythmic. So you'll always have the formula for the rest of your life on how to upgrade your instrument. Once in a while you may need to check in with us. One thing I have told people, and I don't care if I've gotten to the point where I've taught 1,000 people, if you've taken my courses, you can always reach out to me and we can spend 10 minutes on a Zoom or on the phone or on FaceTime. Because if it's not happening anymore, there's something simple that you forgot. And I'm sure we'll find it in 5 minutes. And then you go back to doing it. It's like that book, Beginner's Mind. I don't know what the book says, but it's a hell of a title. Every time you practice something with a beginner's mind, you have the humility not to try to extend it, but to rediscover it over and over again. That creates depth in your rhythm, harmony, or melody. One of the common things that makes sure that we are always just skimming the surface, when you think of progress as moving forward, you've got a wrong understanding. Progress means going down, deeper, into the same thing you thought you knew. That's where this collateral benefit springs up like drilling for oil. Boom, I kept going deeper into the ease of rhythm. And one day, I almost cried because my body took over. It's not going to take over by doing more exercises. It's going to take over noticeably by owning the first exercise. You know? What else, Viv?
Unmute yourself, Viv.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions. I'm like multitasking. I'm trying to get
Whatever we can do.
everybody's question in. Rod is asking, is this course based on the exercises in the PDF we just shared? Can Kenny have a word about that? It's hard to figure out.
Just an example of something that some of you people that really need to start from somewhere. Everybody could use those exercises. That might be where we start, but it's going to be much more learning how to practice them so deeply that they enter you. Some of you might be drummers, that might not be, and yet a drummer may not notice why they play well, but they don't play better, which is an interesting topic. Let me just visit for a second. It's kind of easier to see why you don't play good and other people play just better. But it's really hard, as many of you, I'm sure, in this middle earth, you know, of like, I play good, but why is somebody else playing the same thing I'm playing? And it's just another level, you know? The difference when you know certain things and someone else knows certain things, why are there two different levels? It can be defined with the ease with which they play it. Let me relate another story about when I was younger, right? And this story about Jan Hammer. If you don't know who Jan Hammer was, he was in the Mahavishnu Orchestra. But then he also was the guy that scored the TV show Miami Vice. And he was one of the most naturally rhythmic players. And he's from Eastern Europe. So it really proves you don't have to necessarily be from a rhythmic country. But whatever he did, he had rhythm easily on Chicoree's level, but I guess he didn't have the aspiration of becoming as well known as a piano player. Anyway, I'm trying to make this short. His partner in owning a farm upstate was Gene Perla. If you don't know who that was, he was the bass player for many years with Elvin Jones. So Gene was going to get married. He asked me to put a band together. And I'm playing for all these great musicians on Fender Rhodes with a nice trio. And even like Jan, these people come up, man, you sound great, blah, 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 you know. I'm feeling great, right? At the end of the party, these percussionists come marching down the street and they want to jam in Gene's honor for his wedding. And Jan has his organ moved up from the basement. He must have had those whatever you call those things. And he hadn't touched an instrument all day. He might not have touched an instrument in 2 weeks. I have no idea. But because his motor skill was such, he started jamming with those guys. And I said, holy shit, if I got to hear from 4 hours of playing, he just touches an instrument and it started right there. I said, why does he start beyond the place that I would graduate to? I know what he's doing. I do the same thing. What's the difference? The difference is if he puts a hand on the keyboard, that's what it does. If a drummer, let's say Steve Gadd or, you know, somebody, you know, or whoever, you know, I don't know, whoever you want to pick. I don't even know, Brian Blade or whoever drummers play in the music you like. Maybe there's certain drummers for rock or metal or whatever, right? But some of them, they start to play, and maybe you even play that same stuff. But you know there's a difference. But you never been able to figure out what the difference is. The difference is how much that's what their body does and how much you have to make your body do that. So what we want to take you is wherever you're at, whatever level you have to manage rhythm on, and move to another level where rhythm happens. Somehow that was an answer to your question. What else?
Rod says, thanks.
Yeah.
It was. Dylan says, how can I prove limb independence as a drummer?
What kind of independence?
Limb
Independence. For what instrument?
as a drummer.
Oh, as a drummer. Well, that's not necessarily rhythm, because you can do that by practicing the independence. The motor skill of independence is, now this is effortless mastery, okay? Before you try to do it in the context of a rhythm, you want to be able to do it abstractly. Independence. And while these things are moving independently, you want to stay in a space where you're not doing anything. Having gotten comfortable with that abstraction, you take one example, a model of independence. It should only be a few bars long. And I'll show you how to take it apart. So that just this part and the foot do this, or just this and the foot do that. And by the time you've mastered 2 bars of independence, you will notice, if you've mastered it, if you own it, you'll notice that independence is not as vague as it was before. You'll notice that it's already had an effect on your playing. And then you'll notice that if you can do it for 2 bars, it's just as possible to do it for 4 bars. And then you might say, yeah, but I'm still not a master of independence. No. Then you take another example that you can't do. You upgrade the body. 4th step in effortless mastery is upgrading the body so it can do things it couldn't do. So if independence is something you can't do, instead of looking at the whole world of independence and knocking on the glass and not being able to get in, you take a short example of independence and you break it down until, in whatever way, read the 4th step, because you've probably read my book. Read the 4th step. You're going to break up the neurological movements until they're easy. Then you're going to nurse them along until they happen more and more by themselves. And when you get to the point where that independence happens, even for a short amount, by itself, you're going to see whether or not it continues to happen, or do you have to jump in. Or you take another example and you do it. If you were to keep doing that, I would say you would notice improvement in limb independence over this next year as opposed to looking at it as a total subject and never really changing. So the answer is you own an example of exactly what it is you want to become. And then you've already put some insight into the body, what that feels like. And you just do it with another example and another example.
Awesome. I see a question about mixing rhythm and harmony.
Rhythm should be experienced without burdening it with harmony. So first, we want to make sure that the body can play rhythm. Then there's such a thing which I've only recently started to call smart rhythm. What is smart rhythm? You might be playing exact chords. You might be playing exact lines, but you're still just playing rhythms. Let me give you an example. If we were just doing a vamp, right? And nobody has to learn to play on changes here. All I've ever do in my courses is, what do you want to do? I have no opinion of what music you should play, right? Because I have no opinion about music. But my job, if you want to put it that way, what's in your way? What's preventing you from taking in what you need for the music you care about? But so I'm going to use jazz as an example, right? If I'm just playing a one chord vamp, I can just think of the rhythm. Now I'm only focusing on my hands bouncing off the keys because I don't have to think about the change of chord, therefore the change of scale, therefore different variations of voicings or lines based on the change of scale. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want all that stuff to cloud what I'm training, which is the body to play rhythm. But let me just show you smart rhythm. Here's a tune a lot of people think of as difficult, giant steps. If you're a jazz player, now it's much more accessible than it used to be. Poor Tommy Flanagan, he shows up on that record date, and John Coltrane pulls out giant steps. That must be the meanest thing that a saint like John Coltrane ever did. You really have to, giant steps was a new level of harmonic manipulation from one chord to another. And you're lucky if you can play it, let alone rhythm. So what I want is a rhythm that plays, and then smart rhythm is being able to move through the changes, but my body's still playing rhythm. So what I just did with one chord? I mean, I studied giant steps and I had to really take care to make sure I made the changes. But my understanding of effortless mastery is that I wanted the changes to disappear. I'm still playing rhythm.
There's actually two people that asked a similar related question. John and Sebastian both ask, do you feel the pulse or do you count the pulse in numbers?
I had to count. I had to count the pulse until I didn't have to count anymore. I feel the pulse. I'll tell you, you know where I feel it? In my hands. I don't have to tense anything else up because I took the extra time to let my hands take in the intelligence. Because I'm not going to play, it's going to be my hands. Once you even decide, I'm not training my ego to play rhythm, I'm training my body to play rhythm. I'm not training my ego to play chords. I'm training my body. That means you want them to come out without your mind, you know? So I can do the same thing at another tempo. If I had to do this, then I know there'd be something I would want to practice. Know if you're going to get there, probably not, because when I watch Keith Jarrett, I can say I'm probably never going to get there. But don't ask the wrong question. He's not playing like that because he's Keith Jarrett, and I'm playing like this because I'm Kenny Werner. He's playing like that because there's certain motor skills that I have not absorbed yet. So I don't know if I'm going to get that far, but I know I'm going to improve because now I'm asking the right question. What can't my body do? And what exercise would teach it to do it? I like to stay out of it. Effortless mastery on a spiritual side is presuming that music's coming through you. So how could it come through you? So how could it come through you if you're always trying to judge the quality of it? I mean, most people were drawn to the book Effortless Mastery because we all share a very common negative habit, judging ourselves. The problem is with judging yourself in music, as I always say to everybody in the first course, the first day of any Effortless Mastery course, they say, has judging yourself while you're playing ever made you play better? No, in fact, it makes you play worse at that precise moment. But then they didn't say, so how do I learn to play the instrument without judging myself? Now we're talking pure effortless mastery. You have to wean yourself off of the narcissistic need to sound good. Now, once you don't care about sounding good, then you can let the body train, which paradoxically or ironically makes you sound better than ever. If I ask any of you, when you had one of those high point type of times when you were playing, were you judging yourself? No. Were you expecting something? No. Did you have a standard that you weren't reaching up to? No. Those are all the times you couldn't get it happening. So effortless mastery, by the way, the most recent definition of it, because it keeps evolving. It's not yet a dogma that I just repeat. In my mind, it's kind of a living idea. And the most recent, meaning the last year or so, definition of effortless mastery, it might be in the new book, but I know it wasn't in the old book. Effortless mastery is liberating the body from the mind and liberating the mind from the ego. Effortless mastery is liberating the body from the mind and liberating the mind from the ego. So the question is, why are both of those necessary? Because you can only eliminate, if you get your mind out of the way, the body's going to start to play, but you're going to jump in again unless the mind has been liberated from the ego. This is an ancient yogic principle. I don't know. The earliest I ever heard about it is, when you go back to the early rudiments of, I don't like saying Hinduism because that's a religion. The spiritual precepts of the body and the mind as an instrument, whether you believe in that shit or not, is very useful when it comes to training yourself to be a musician. Because if I've actually grown to believe how good or bad I play doesn't say anything about me, then I'm usually going to play good. So even if my ego, if I really do just want to play better, it is learning how to dance away from the ego that will allow you to play better. And then the ego will enjoy that. That's not to say it won't get in the way of the next thing you try to do. I always look at it as like check or checkmate. The ego says, wow, you're really doing well. That's check. You go, I don't need to do well. Whoa, no checkmate. Ego scurries off the board. Disappointed. You go, man, I'll never learn to do this. You say, I don't care. Ah, shit, I thought I had it there for a minute. These are all, you want to call it Zen, it's Zen, whatever. I don't care what it is. To me, one of the things I'm happiest about is it's progressed to just being common sense. You ask yourself, do I play better when I try to urge myself to play, or do I play worse? Do I play better when I have expectations, or do I play worse? When I rate myself, does that help or does it hurt? And then you start to see that these spiritual precepts, that we've actually separated ourselves by looking at them as spiritual. You miss the fact that they're also common sense. I'd rather play badly from a state of freedom than play well holding on. Now, you might say that sounds awfully nice, but it's a trick statement. Because whenever I have played from a free place of freedom, I've never played badly. So I'm saying, oh, really? Oh, you mean if it's like taking, if anybody's in program, there's a lot of program that's similar to that too. Trust, serenity with things you cannot change, right? Seems like an awful tall order. So you need small exercises. Say, okay, I want to experience freedom and then accept the consequences. And then you find out, instead of jumping off a cliff, you jumped off and there was 1 foot. But now you're free. On a spiritual note, there was a place I've gone to. I don't know if there are any devotees of the thing I've done. I never talk about it. I don't identify it. Because frankly, that's the policy of the place that I've gone to. And I won't say that it can't be found in a lot of other similar spiritual paths. But there was a statue there. It was of Shiva. And as such a needy person all my life, the statue says, luminous from within, free from all support. And I said, shit, man, I want that. Or at least I want more of that. The support that I need from things that, when you don't have support from within, you're looking for support from everything. And when you're looking for support from music, you're placing more drama on whether or not you're going to get it. So then I take you back to the statement of 5 minutes ago. Whenever you've needed more from music, isn't that when it's harder to play? So it all kind of dovetails. And I've had the gift of teaching it so many times that I finally said, why don't you try this yourself? You know? And it makes me happy. The same way I let my hands move without questioning them. But if they do something wrong, then I know there's something I need to study. I don't make it an indictment on my entire life. There's a statement that people have been in my courses. I'll say it for this webinar. I would never let my value as a human be determined by anything as insignificant as how I play a musical instrument. Now that doesn't sound like the way you were raised, right? But let me say it again. I would never let my value as a human be influenced by something as insignificant as how I play a musical instrument. So many of you can have all kinds of arguments with that, but I'll just ask you to refer to your own history. The more significant you think it is, doesn't that make it harder to play? At the times you were playing the way you wanted to, something tricked you into not caring. You know? Maybe you had a couple of beers. That's why drugs and alcohol were so much in art history. People were looking for a way to drop their defenses so that they could just play. And I don't recommend it doing through drugs and alcohol, because I tried that. The only problem with that is that you get more preoccupied with the drugs and alcohol before you get the results of dropping your ego. But there's a way to train to come to the instrument without thoughts. Now, what can this instrument do on that instrument? And you train yourself to not blow up the importance of that. And now you're on the precipice of working on your playing. It couldn't be done all that time when there was so much drama. Who you are, how good you are, how other people play, is this valid? I don't know, a lot of you. And a lot of you have actually accomplished amazing things because you're not musicians. You might have done a startup to change the world, and you're a multimillionaire. And yet you could still walk around feeling somehow insufficient because you never learned to play the way you want. You know, music's got a hell of a delusion to it. In Sanskrit, the word is Maya, which means illusion or delusion. And boy, music's got a whole lot of Maya to it. I wanted to write an article, at least, the Maya of music. Because I don't think I could write a whole book. I don't know if there's enough chapters. But I'll tell you the first Maya of music, that it's somehow, its importance is greatly exaggerated. And that exaggeration of importance is worth noting because it's what's in your way. You don't brush your teeth with any impending sense of importance or profundity. And that's why you do it regularly. So we need to deactivate all that shit and simply make ourselves available for an upgrade. You know? In program, they say don't quit one day before the miracle happens. You know? There's a lot of different things I carp together to try to formulate something that allows you to play better. Because the bottom line, no matter how cool it sounds philosophically or rhythmically, spiritually, it's about wanting to play better. You know? It just so happens that a few wise renovations will allow you to play better. And then you just have to temper your excitement about the fact that you're playing better. Because even that gets in the way, hasn't it? Whenever you played so great, you couldn't forget how great you played. I would ask you, how was the next gig? Terrible. You know? The ego is very similar in everybody. So when the ego, which I call the devil, when you look at what the properties of the ego, and then you look about how the devil was written about in literature, you see that unless you have a religious belief about the devil, it really is the ego part of the human experience. Because everything the ego does is just what the devil does in The Devil and Daniel Webster, or, raises your hopes. Now you have a way to disappoint yourself. From the space, from this moment, there's no need for hope. Hope gets in the way of action. And instead of deciding how rhythmic you are, let's start training you to be more rhythmic than you are today. And that means getting a few egoistic understandings, being able to just let them go and train. So the benefit is, of course, much more than rhythm. But there's no question your rhythm will improve as we go on. And when we're done, you'll always have a way to continue to sharpen your rhythm. That was the end of that answer, I believe. Here.
Yeah, that was a very long answer. But great. Andre said, is it like getting rid of free will?
That's an interesting question, which won't help you get better rhythm, but I'm going to answer it anyway. All those things. Ask me that question again, please.
Is it like getting rid of free will?
Oh, it's a very vague question. How do you get rid of free will? What is free will?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one.
It's kind of a tough one. Let me first say that for me, free will is taking any actions. And, all right, in program, for example, free will is, they say, you take the action and you turn over the results. In the program, the third step is you turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand him, right? Now, maybe you don't even think there's a God, but there is an essence of a good strategy in there. Taking the action is how I use my free will. The results are not even my business. When I've learned to do that, I take a lot more actions. Free will that's dependent on success is not free at all. Oh, I know the good analogy. In our music, jazz, there's something called free music, right? But there's nothing more pathetic than people. Did you ever get together with your friends and say, let's play free? There's nothing more pathetic than watching people try to play free music correctly. The ego even gets into that. What is free music? The only free music is music that's free from self-judgment. In that way, minuet and G is free music. And playing free can be horribly restrictive and kind of pathetic, if you ask me. The best therapy of free music is that you don't have to rate it anymore. Good, bad, valid, invalid, the real shit, none of that bullshit. Free music is allowing the body to play the instrument. And the sound is what happens when several people do it in the same room. And short of that, it's just another ruse. I mean, when I see people trying to play free music correctly, I gotta laugh. So maybe free will is the same thing. The only free will there is maybe will free from self-judgment. Within these boundaries, you do no harm, you don't hurt other people, and you're hopefully not hurting yourself. But how much short of that? How careful are we before it even gets close to any of that? I don't know if I'll say this because they might take it wrong. Instead of, this is what wants to be said by me. There's a documentary on George Carlin, and the reason it's great on Netflix, I think. But he said something that's going to come into. I use whatever I hear. I use Star Trek. If you've read the recent book, I use movies. I use Twilight Zone. But he said something in there. When he's doing comedy, he's not there to try to influence other people's beliefs. He's there to share what he believes. What you think of what he believes is not even his business. That's what made him so powerful. There could be a comedian. This is a good analogy because a comedian that wants you to believe the premise that they're putting, even teachers. I found even more, there must be many teachers here, right? I found that when I don't care if my students get it or not, I'm so much better teacher. That the weight of needing them to get it, again, ironically, gets in the way of how effective I can be. So a comedian that's hoping to persuade an audience is anemic. And he said it so well. I don't go there to influence the beliefs of my audience. I go there to inform them of my beliefs. That's your strength, not in hoping it goes well, but learning to be no block between you and the free will to act on whatever's coming through you, which is a fancy way of saying that's jazz. Jazz can be as anemic. Some people think they're liberated by practicing jazz. Music will not liberate you. Brazilian music will not make you happy, and jazz will not make you daring. Music is nothing. If a person plays music with no self-judgment, that music has power. Doesn't matter the level of it. Brazilian music doesn't make you happy. People are happy, and then they play Brazilian music. But if you're trying to play Brazilian music correctly, it's not making you any happier and it's not making anyone else happy. If you want to be an influence on other people, you want to get to the root of what propels you, what compels you, and stop interrupting it with the what ifs. That's the life lesson. I've been doing it in music for a long time, but I tell you, for me, life was a harder subject. And I feel like from the gift of teaching it, I'm very close to that. So I kind of, it's not about what it's not about your reaction. It's about me allowing what wants to come through me without editing. As long as I'm not hurting, I error. If you're not going to control what comes out of your mouth, sometimes you are really going to fuck up. But I can tell you it's only happened very little compared to all the times that by letting it come out, it actually helped somebody else. It is really some kind of paradox or irony, I think that was an answer to the question, but I no longer remember the question.
It was question? About free
will. All day, 'cause if I'm helping you at all, it's giving me great pleasure.
I have a question that Sarah posted. Do you think age interferes with learning rhythm specifically?
No, it's the perception of age that interferes with learning rhythms.
Right.
Yeah, it was a nice short answer.
Yeah. How do you deprogram something that seems to be built in, like dragging or rushing? How do you deprogram Rodrigo?
That's a few isolated bars of letting the body do it. And then if you do that over and over again, the body, it's not you that's dragging, it's your desire that's dragging. And it's dragging the body, the more you train yourself not to drag, and it's a bodily function. Music at its most organic, there's a word for the modern age, right? organic. Music at its most organic, that's what the body does. Everything else is trying to look like you're somebody or sound like you're somebody. You know, preoccupied with how good you sound all the time, I introduced the term only recently, sonic narcissism. Sounds great. Like, okay, if I say, Sarah, when you play, what are you trying to do? And you say, Kenny, when I'm playing, I really want to sound good, you know? Or if I said, Sarah, when you're talking to somebody, what are you trying to do? When I'm talking to somebody, I really want to sound good. Moving into that issue exposes it for its shallowness. I'd rather get out of the way and ironically let the body learn how to play. It is my concern that is one of the big factors that gets in the way of actually doing it.
Next question
Sure.
is, do you think there's some kind of a natural talent in rhythm or versus harmony, or a natural
I don't know about,
melodic talent?
yeah, there is a thing as natural talent because I have it. I'm one of the most talented people I ever met. If I also had a good work ethic, I might have been the greatest musician on the planet. But work ethics, it's really good if you have a good work ethic.
Lost video.
What happened?
I think
Lost
Joe's
video.
Still there for me.
Then you lost video.
Oh, I'll be damned.
But my talent was so evident that it was almost like a free ride. Yo, fuck yeah, there is talent. It doesn't lock you out of the kingdom of heaven. A good process can get you further than having talent, because if you have talent and you've learned to not to work on anything, then whenever the talent doesn't take you any further, you don't know what to do. I want to give you a good example of this. We went, I don't know how many years ago, I was invited to Bill Evans's 50th birthday party, and I think this is in the first book. And so this was like, can you imagine a whole room filled with piano players? It's like a Hitler convention. You never see that many piano players in one room. So one of all us little chickens, us little fledglings, someone says, Bill, what do you practice? And he said, I practice the minimum. The minimum? You mean the minimum amount of time? No, the minimum amount of material. So in other words, he would not practice more than what he could absorb. And watch this video. Go to YouTube, Bill Evans on the creative process, is it called? I forget what that video is called. It's Bill being interviewed by his brother. And in different ways, he shows how people who let their desire to be creative manifest before their patience to learn how to speak the language. They play in a way that he used the word approximate. But that says it too. So Bill would always assert that he wasn't very talented. Personally, I have trouble believing that. But the reason Bill played so great is because he had a process that was so pinpoint. If I play 2 chords and my hands don't know where they are yet, why would I move on to the 3rd chord? That's practicing the minimum. So, talent allows you to get very far on a minimum of work. But it's not a deal breaker. And effortless mastery means you drop that whole question. Question is not how talented I am. What could I do today to upgrade the instrument? Me. You know? Talent is definitely a thing because believe me, it doesn't make you feel good. When you see how easy you achieve things, it kind of makes you feel guilty. And then I got to college, and there were other talented people, but they knew how to practice. Now I really felt like a piece of shit because it wasn't unique that I was talented anymore. But it seemed to me like everyone else knew how to practice but me. I had gotten by just on talent. Talent can't take you past what finally needs some work, but a good work process can carry you quite a bit farther than your so-called allocation of talent. I think that's the end of that question.
So I have two more questions, and then we need to wrap it up. Christopher asked, as far as looking around the corner to the future beat you're playing toward, how set are you on the one harmonic melodically? Do you hear it as rhythm plays that you're landing, or are you hearing chord tones, or is it more abstract? You're just chasing it. I
What?
asked it because
I don't really
I
understand.
think he's wondering if you're hearing into the future.
Oh, do I hear what I'm going to play?
I think that's the question.
No.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Christopher.
All right. One of the biggest misnomers in education is you have to hear what you're going to play. Not only is that a misnomer, it's not possible. Only people that can't really play would say that. Unfortunately, many of them are teachers. How could you hear what you're going to play? You're involved in what you're playing. We're going to divorce yourself from what you're playing to try to hear what you're going to play? Somehow that got loose in the education universe, but it's completely wrong. It's related to something. You don't hear what you play, but you sense where you're going. And now we come back to rhythm. If I want to play lines right now, like a... If I'm playing on every beat, then I'm trying to push this thing uphill. But if I let my body sort of collapse into the next resolution point, then the music gets loose, but it always resolves on time. So watch, you like... And one of the ways I practice that is with a wide metronome. This doesn't feel fast to me because it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's like 1, 2. That's the way. Nobody teaches it. But if you're not ready for that, then that's not what you're going to do. You're going to do something that gets to the point where you could let it go. A lot of you play good enough. You want your playing to move forward right now today. Stop paying attention to everything in between the goalposts. Just land on it. Play nonsense in between. Somehow get to, and drummers that play stiffly. It's because you're playing every beat. Anybody that plays, now go back to YouTube and look at people that play great. You'll notice that they've got the wider beat in their body. Again, it comes back to the body. So, do you know what you're going to play in the future? Even attempting to do that, whoever asked that question, I would suggest whenever you attempted to do it, you notice that's one of the many times you can't even play. But if you allow the hands to move, or the arm, or whatever, and you practice, allowing the body to relax on. I mean, if we had more time, I would show that video. Look at, I'll give you a few more examples, right? That after we're done, you should use these. YouTube, Miles Davis Quintet, So What? John Coltrane, Jimmy Cobb, what's his name? Paul Chambers, right? Watch Miles' solo, and then watch Train solo. Two completely different ways of achieving the rhythm. But you'll notice how they both, invisibly, organize themselves, it must be even in the body, by the resolutions. Now that I've said that to you, I would invite you to watch that video. Say, oh, I've even seen this video. But I didn't realize what pulls the music along is the notion that I'm at least leaning forward towards the next resolution. But even knowing that's not helpful if you don't practice it. So it's kind of, We're going to deal with as many of these situations as we can. But when you get the point of how you sharpen your tools, like I think, if you get to the point where you know how to sharpen your tools, hopefully the work goes on because now you're not deluded anymore. You know? What's the delusion? What's the Maya? That music is somehow more important than you? We want to undo that. You know why? Because it doesn't work. When music's more important than you always feel unworthy to play it. That may sound like humility, but it's not. It's supreme ego. It's just negative ego. Instead of walking around with the idea that I'm all that, I'm walking around with the comfortable idea that I'm a piece of shit, that I'm unworthy. Both of them are still you walking around thinking about you. You know? So,
Great. Thank you, Kenny. We need to wrap it up.
right.
I will send everybody the video of this session. I really enjoyed it, and
Well, I just want to say one thing. Joe Bjornsson says saxophonist Dave Liebman states Miles Davis had perfect time. I got to tell you, when you play the goalposts, it's a lot easier to play perfect time. Okay, now you can wrap it up.
So yeah, I hope to see you all in the course. Don't hesitate to reach out to me with all your questions if you know, and you can sign up for a phone call because that's the way to go. You can also just sign up, obviously.
Yeah, if you want to check it out with me, you know, that's the phone call. If you think, yeah, this speaks to me, I hope I'll see you there.
Great. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see you soon. Bye, guys.